So I thought I would take this opportunity to read a section from a Quo channeling from LL Research. Quo is described as a social memory complex from the future. They are a group of intelligent beings that have transcended physical reality. They've evolved past third density. I believe they describe themselves as a sixth density collective. But anyway, if you want to look into the densities and stuff, you can find more on that in the raw contact specifically, and other channelings from LL Research. Anyway, this is how it goes. I am of Quo, and greet each again in love and light. Ah, to be upon the road, and to forget that the feet are walking, to become numb to the dust, to smell not the heat of the damp, of the dew upon the dust as you trudge. In the morning light of young and unskilful pilgrimage, you carry your brother and your sister in your heart, and think that they are upon your back, to be numb in the feet, in the heart, and to feel burdens that are not there. This is one way to describe one who serves with every heartbeat, yet believes that one must carry a load, one must show weight and effort in order to serve. Is not every step an effort? Are those feet not dusty and sore? Is the heart not full to bursting with compassion and love and will? What is this fetish about the showing of burdens, about the suffering that is visible? Is this carrying of burdens that what each thinks that service is? So here Quo is highlighting how in the human family, in our current state, we have a tendency to mistake service for struggle. Or like we have to exemplify that our service is burdensome in order for it to be of value. And it's a way of showing each other sort of like value. I forget what that term is, but like showing our value by, look how much I'm suffering, so I must be of greater service than you because I'm trying harder. These sorts of things. It's an imbalance that the human family is sort of waking up out of. So it continues here. Let us move back from this scene and think of the heart of each entity who desires to serve. Is this heart active, defined by action? Is it completely passive, asleep and incapable of action? Or are both sleeping and waking, dreaming and acting, informed by an unsleeping and ever-living consciousness that merely and utterly is? So I think here Quo is really pointing to the non-dual nature of what we are, that our existence itself is a service. It's not something that we either do or don't do, succeed or fail at, but is really just in our being. Our service is our existence. He says, are both sleeping and waking, dreaming and acting, informed by an unsleeping and ever-living consciousness that merely and utterly is. And it continues, any determination to be of service begins not with dreaming and not with acting, but with consciousness itself, and that consciousness is that which is purified by a fire of desire, which tempers consciousness, cleanses it of the confusing, self-deprecating, or arrogant emotion, so that one is neither consumed with unworthiness, nor battened by pride, but merely is, as is the Father in all things, merely is, as is the nurturer of all things, merely and utterly is, as is the spirit of love that is the nature of all that is. So, what we are in truth is beyond these confusing dualities of they're pointing out how the imbalance of ego consciousness often will either take the posture of unworthiness, which self-deprecating, or arrogance, pride. So look how much I'm doing. Kind of like a competitive pridefulness. Look how much I'm doing. Or look how pitiful I am. It's so sad. I'm not worthy of serving my fellow man because I'm such a pitiful creature, so poor. And both of these are kind of the same thing. The ego will actually flip-flop from one to the other. As long as it's maintaining a sense of separateness. So in arrogance, I'm so much better than everyone else, look how pitiful they are. And then the other side of it, I'm so pitiful, everyone else is better than me, I'm not worthy to be of service. And then Quo goes into say that what resolves that is our acknowledgement of the truth of what we are. That what we are merely is, unchanging by these vacillations of the ego mind. The father of all things merely is, the masculine principle, pure awareness, merely is. The nurturer of all things, so that's the feminine principle, just is what we are. And the spirit of love, that is the nature of all that is. One serves because one is of a certain nature. If that nature be impure, the service shall be impure. If that nature is undisciplined and unguided, the service will be undisciplined and unguided. If this consciousness chooses negative ways of distorting itself, its service will express itself in manipulation and control of others. And if the purified consciousness has been purified towards love without any hindrance, let or stint, then the service of such one will be beyond description. Whatever the action, the essence of the service will remain within the beingness that informs the service. So, we serve according to our nature. In truth, we are all pure in heart, but we all, in our human expression, contain different batches of distortion, vibratory distortion. And we serve based on that. It's not really like a decision, like I could be doing this better. It's like as you are, you will serve. And even the most negative entity in this viewpoint is serving the whole, although they're completely unconscious of it. They're serving, in their own view, just serving themselves. But from the view of the whole, there's really no escape from service of wholeness, because they are acting as a catalyst for others. That's how this channeled group often puts it. So negatively oriented beings catalyze growth in each other and in positively oriented beings. So they produce the sort of moral playground that we dance in. And obviously a super negatively oriented soul, when you encounter that one, creates this great opportunity for you to polarize positive, which means no matter what, I'm staying in service to whole. I'm staying in positively orientation, even in the face of what we call evil. Now, obviously, that's a stronger decision than staying positively oriented around other positively oriented beings. So that is their service. And again, to think that there's someone there doing that is a misconception. It is itself an imbalance in the mind. Really, they are just vibrating according to their nature. And I think that's what Quo is hinting at here. No one can keep from serving, no entity whatsoever. Thinking upon this may begin to take the emphasis off wanting to serve, for that desire is after the fact. We would transfer this energy to the one known as Aaron at this time. We are known to you as Quo, so it's switching over to Aaron. This is Aaron. Quo spoke about unworthiness and pride. These are both manifestations of ego. I would suggest the usefulness of beginning to regard service in a different way, not as a strained giving, or even as an eager giving, but as a gift. There is no joy that I know so deep as that of serving, and a part of that joy inherent in service is the emptiness of self that one comes to when one truly moves out of oneself in order to serve. So much of your pain comes from the illusion of a solid self. Without that illusion, neither ego nor pride can exist. There is no unworthiness, there is no grasping. Service is truly your path beyond ego, because as you walk that path of service, you see constantly how that illusory self arises, seeing the seeming solidity of ego as you become bound in fear. So here Aaron is saying that service is a great gift, that it helps us move out of ego. It moves us beyond unworthiness and pride, because the act of service itself highlights unworthiness and pride in our mind. So with all things, seeing the imbalance is the first step of transcending it. And also he points that both those things are of the ego, and that the pain comes from this illusion of a solid self, the ego. What you see is a magnification of what exists. We have talked about this at length, and I believe we spoke about it a bit last year when we were here. If you offer something 99% purely and 1% with the impurity of ego, you are aware not of the 99% but of the 1%, and you condemn yourself for that. You forget so quickly that this service is offered by a human. The spirit is unlimited, but the human does have its limits. Thus you tend to become lost in that small percentage of the service that is guided by ego, rather than the much greater percentage that is guided by true aspiration to serve God and the deep love for all that to which the servant feels itself connected. So Aaron here is pointing out that there's a tendency in the human state to focus on the negative, basically. So even in the desire to serve and the act of service, we tend to focus in on any negativity in the impulse. So we'll say, look, I just did that just to get credit. And we'll downplay the purity of the impulse, the love that was motivating it, and we will upplay the 1% impurity of, like, look how bad I am for wanting to be seen as a good person for my service, or something like that. We have this tendency to see ourselves as dark beings. And I think Aaron is pointing out here that it's not of service to focus on that. It's more of service to admit that love is the motivating force of all of us, regardless of any impurities that still might exist on the surface. So to have forgiveness for ourselves, in that sense. As you move into that minute distortion of fear, you start to feel yourself unworthy, or in an effort to override the fear, you move to pride, the latter more rare than the former. For those of you who serve in the ways that you in this room do, you are more prone to unworthiness than pride. When you can remind yourself that the path of service is a gift, wherein a reflective mirror shows where the ego still exists, it gives you a very different perspective on that ego. Going on. At that point you may turn with compassion to this human being that is doing its best to serve, despite the occasional arising of fear. So he's pointing out that fear is at the root of both pride and unworthiness. Pride as a way to bolster the false self against fear, and unworthiness as a way to cringe back from fear, to take the victimhood position and kind of shirk away from fear. So to avoid service out of a sense of unworthiness as an attempt to avoid fear. And he's also saying that compassion is going to be your friend in this process. Use the path of service as a constant reflection of the arising of the ego, so that you may allow that illusion to dissolve. If you were not given this catalyst of service in the way that those in this room ask themselves to serve, you would not have the strong promptings that you each have to purify yourselves. Yes, you are here to serve others, but the wonderful gift of that service is that, in the course of it, this aspect of the one that you identify as self must be allowed continually to dissolve, and dissolve more fully, until all illusion of separation is eradicated. So the path of service as a way of dissolving the ego, basically, because the impulse to serve will reflect up unworthiness and pride caused by fear. And seeing that fear allows you to notice the impurity from the purity of what you are. So always, you are already pure. That's the truth of what you are. But you've forgotten this truth of perfect purity and taken yourself to be this limited being who is a batch of different vibrational frequencies, what can be called impurity. It doesn't have a negative connotation, but is the deepest service is the purification of self. So service of others allows the purification of self, I think, is what he's pointing to here. Until the illusion of separation is eradicated. I would like to relate this thought to Barbara's question. Barbara spoke of the arising of fear and the distortion created by the desire to serve, by grasping at service. Can you see that the grasping is a manifestation of unworthiness? When you know that you serve simply by being, there is no longer a need for grasping. So unworthiness can suggest that service is a path towards worthiness. So from unworthiness, I feel unworthy, so if I serve, maybe I'll feel better, or I'll make myself worthy. And Aaron's showing here that if you understand that what you are is service, then there's no need to grasp at it. It's not something you have to do. It's just what you are. And it's what every being is, so it's not special, actually. It allows us to relax into service. What I am is service. Service to the whole. That's why I'm here. That's the function of the human. Last month, Kay shared a very beautiful poem with us, a poem that she was taught as a child by her grandmother. I do not know if I have it completely accurate, but as I recall it, the words were, I am the place that God shines through, for God and I are one, not two. God wants me where and as I am. I need not fret, nor will, nor plan. If I'll just be relaxed and free, He'll carry out His will through me. Beautiful. This is truly the essence of it, relaxed and free, not willing, not planning, just being and trusting that you will be placed where you need to be to serve as you are asked to serve. You do not need to set up such situations of service so much as to allow them to happen. You allow them to happen by purifying your own energy, by constant work on yourselves, by prayer, by your constant offer to be of service without grasping at that service, and by deep awareness that when you say, I need to serve, that is a manifestation of unworthiness and of ego. I need to serve so I can feel better about myself. Well, fine, but first feel better about yourself, and then all the service you want will pour through you. It really is as simple as that. I believe the important thing here is to become aware each time that I need to arises, that there is a sense of unworthiness behind it, a sense of fear. The first step, then, is mindfulness, deep awareness, each time that sense of fear arises. The second step is acceptance of this human who sometimes feels fear. Just a smile and a "here is fear again, come in fear, I have been expecting you." Give yourself a hug and return to the act of loving, of worship of God, of extending your loving energy in whatever ways you can, not just to others but to yourself. With the acceptance of that small arising of fear, it will not grow into distortion. So acceptance of fear is the medicine of fear. Come in fear, welcome fear. Otherwise, fear, if it attempts to be avoided, it manifests into unworthiness and pride, as it was saying earlier, and grows through the ignorance of it, because if it's not acknowledged, it will go into behavioral expression, and then the reflections, it will send ripples out. Reality will be shifted into shining back reasons to be fearful. Fear breeds fear. But love overcomes fear. That's what acceptance does. It folds fear in. You do not have to get rid of fear. You only have to recognize that it is there. The fear does not interfere with your being a clear channel, for example, but your relationship with fear interferes with it. If you wish to serve others in any way, serving food in a soup kitchen, working in a homeless shelter, counseling others, or whatever ways you may choose to serve, you need not eradicate fear, but recognize it and find mercy for this human who sometimes feels fear, and in that way change your relationship to fear. So, mercy, compassion for yourself is compassion for all beings, and allows a greater purity of service. Compassion for the fear that arises is what allows you to just keep moving regardless of what fear may arise. So, beautiful. Until you change your own relationship to the fear that sometimes moves through you, you cannot clearly serve another, because you will always be in some amount of judgment of his or her fear and the distortions that fear creates in another. There will also always be he who serves and he who is served, as long as you are not friends with the fear in you. But when you can make friends with that and thereby befriend fear and all its distorted manifestations in another, you remove the separation of self and other, and then there is no longer servant and served. Both are servant and both are served. So pointing out that undoing the sense of separate selves allows for service to become this non-linear experience that benefits both parties. The receiver and the giver equally are blessed in the exchange. Do you think that when you serve another by offering them food, that does not serve you? Here is the distortion of pride. I am the servant. And again it creates separation, and such separation cannot serve anyone. When I offer you food and you offer me the opportunity to offer you food, I thank you for that. You give me a gift, truly. I offer you my thoughts right now, and I cannot express the deep gratitude in my heart for the opportunity to speak to you all, and the ways that you serve me by giving me your listening and your open-hearted attention to my thoughts. Because when you listen to me, it makes me be more responsible for the purity of those thoughts, and thus stretches me and aids me to grow. It's beautiful. So the listening brings more awareness to the sharing, and then the sharing is purified through that exchange. All benefit. Beautiful. So I ask you to remove the duality in your mind between served and serve, and to look closely at your discomfort with the arising of fear, and see it more clearly for what it is. Truly begin to understand that the fear does not create the distortion in your service, but your relationship with the fear creates that distortion. So any judgment of fear as being out of place, trying to get rid of it, creates distortion. Fear itself does not have the power to create distortion. I feel that Quo would like to speak at this point. There is more I would like to say, but I would prefer to turn this over to my brother-sister for comment and allow us to move back and forth. That is all. So, back to Quo again. This is like a dialogue. I think Aaron is like a, I don't know, fourth density being, an actual human who's passed over to the other side. So it's like a wise human soul. I know that this can sound kind of strange to people, but as you read these things, I mean, that's where it apparently came from. That's what the intelligence names itself. And you can see that it's a very intelligent dialogue, so I always look to the content and judge it based on its content, not on where it came from. So back to Quo. We'll read this one more section from Quo, and then I think that's probably good for now. Quo. We are those of Quo. We greet each again in love and light, and apologize for the brief pause, but we were conferring with our friend Aaron. We hope that each has listened to these words concerning desire, for desire purified does not partake of fear, is not separate, and does not create separation. Remember two things which this wise entity has said. The path of service is a gift. The path of service is a reflection. That's like a summary of what Aaron was saying. Let us look from a slightly different perspective, from a slightly different set of opinions at these statements. These statements can be pondered over and over. So Quo is saying we're going to offer a slightly different perspective. And that's all these are, they're perspectives. So one thing that Quo always reminds us is take what resonates and leave the rest. Trust your guidance of what's of value to you. Different things will be of value to different beings, and your own wisdom is paramount, your own freedom of will. So, trust yourself. Let us look from a slightly different... here we go. The path of service is a gift. What is the path? Is it something you walk, or is it you? Are you the path and the gift? And are you by your very nature serving and served? For if you are of love, and if you have consciousness aware of itself, is this not the only undistorted transaction of which you are capable? The giving and the receiving of that great service which is loving? So, you are of love. You have consciousness aware of itself. This is the only perfectly undistorted transaction, is love emanating pure awareness, aware of itself. Quo gets right to the deeper wisdom core of things, and then Aaron kind of offers us this bridge to the human level. It's very cool. Can you conceive of yourself as a gift, perfect, immutable, whole, and complete, yet transitive, the self as a verb? Only those selves who see that they are not only on holy ground, but they are holy ground, can move from being a he, a she, an it, a noun, into being a verb, a transitive, acting verb that connects love with love, that acts as catalyst between subject and object, because it knows that subject and object are one. Subject is love, object is love. If the subject is self and the object other self. So that's pretty abstract. I might have to read that a few times to actually get to the bottom of what it's talking about there. But let's just let it sink in and trust that if we were meant to understand, we would. And that in truth we do understand. And maybe just right now it's... And maybe the next paragraph will clarify as well. One who is the path and one who knows itself as holy knows that self and other self and all that there is exists in a ground of love, and love speaks to love, serving and served, loving and loved. And as distortions are released, as fear becomes less necessary, as this process gradually takes place, the self becomes the path, the gift and that servant which is finally transparent to love, flowing through it, never from it, flowing to it, but never remaining, for love flows as endlessly as the sea. So all is love. The served and the serving is love, and we get to know ourselves as the verb of love flowing, I think is what they're saying there, that nothing is ever held on to, and there's really no steady entity anywhere. Even the subject-object duality is really just love. So, the path of service is a reflection. This is simply the same statement turned backwards, so that one may see that one is served as one serves. We would not belabor this point, but only wish each to ponder it. You are a reflection to others, just as others reflect you to yourself. What, my friends, shall you reflect to others? Is your mirror transparent? Are you love? Can you allow love to flow through you, and allow the images that you show to others by reflection to be clear and lucid and shining with the light of a truth that is beyond you, but can only flow through you? So, we have the ability to be reflections of love to those around us. And as we do, we are served by them. They offer us reflections of what we have yet to love, and they also offer us the reflection of love shining back at us through the eyes when we can see past the separation to the unity of all beings. Service of self to self. We ask you to ponder this second statement as a corollary of the first, for it does deepen and aid understanding and grasping of the nature of the self as a servant of love, and thus, in serving, served, and thus, when served, serving. We would at this time again move to the one known as Aaron and the one known as Barbara, that we may have the pleasure of listening and learning and enjoying Aaron's opinions. As always, we ask each to know that these are opinions that we offer. We have no authority over you. Know that we are your friends and perhaps your teachers, but not those who ask any to refrain from discrimination. For you know that which is the truth, and if you hear it not through these instruments, we ask you to put it down and walk on without a second thought, for we would not be a stumbling block before you. We leave this instrument. We are those of Quo. So there's that caveat that they often put in, that this is their opinion. If it's helpful, use it positively. If you find it not helpful, drop it. Just drop it. We have the ability to make everything positive to us, and if not positive, at least neutral, which is just dropping it. So anyway, I think we'll stop there for now, and thank you for anybody who watches this later. I enjoy going through this like this, and I hope that you have also enjoyed it and gotten something from it. If you want to check out this source of information, llresearch.org has a searchable database of a lot of these different dialogues. And maybe I'll go into channeling and what channeling is in a different episode. I mean, I'm no expert on the subject, but maybe I can kind of give a general overview of what that is. So thank you, and bye-bye.